Good evening, everybody. Dylan Napoleon here, joined with the same crew that joined me prior to Combat FC 6. Tonight, we're joined by Patrick, Danna, Chris DiCarlo, and matchmaker Rick. Once again, guys, happy to have you. We did a preview show to start the week before the event, and now we're here to recap it. What a great event! A fun night of fights, man, across the whole card, top to bottom. I had a great time. Super glad I stuck around the whole time, and it was one hell of a card. Super happy to be there, and super glad to have you guys here tonight. How you doing, guys?
Doing good. Doing good.
I'm doing good, man. Always a pleasure to come on here and talk about you guys for sure.
Always.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That's right. So, like I said, we're here to recap the card. I had a great time up there. The fights were action-packed and super entertaining. But here we are tonight, just a couple days past and after the event. We're here to break down what we saw and kind of talk about the card and like I said, everything that happened that night. Let's get started with our first fight of the main card that happened at Combat FC 6. That was Josh Medeiros and Adrian Haley. Man, what a fight at a catch weight of 130 pounds. This was a great fight that opened up the main card. I think it was a super great fight to bring up once we knew that one of the title fights was off. Perfect addition to the main card. What do you guys think?
It was a back and forth fight for a while. Medeiros was in control for most of the early portion of the fight, and then he started to fade. And Haley, with experience against some tough veterans, just came back and jumped on him as soon as he started to fade and was able to get him out of there in round 3.
Yeah, I think the cardio fading of Medeiros is kind of what did him in there. You saw he was very explosive, and both guys were definitely going at it early. Medeiros was definitely throwing some big, heavy shots. I saw him working a lot of those uppercuts, which some of them were landing on Haley as well. But yeah, I think, Haley's cardio and his experience kind of carried him through that fight. And then Medeiros unfortunately faded there at the end, and Haley got the W. But it was a great fight to start the night for sure.
Yeah, I think the body work of Haley kind of contributed to the fading of Medeiros there. He was you could see it kind of early in the second round. He started to really add up those body shots, and he just continued to go to the body over and over. And then when he saw Medeiros was starting to get tired, he was just relentless with it. And I think that that's what you see in the experience difference. And even though they're pro records, we're talking about a guy with 1 pro fight versus 5. Adrian had a bunch more amateur fights, and he's just had a lot more cage time. So I think the experience definitely played a big factor, but yeah, it was a really, really good action-packed fight. That was one that I kind of knew going into it had potential to be fight of the night. So I was really happy with that one.
Yeah, well put together fight. I mean, like I said earlier, those guys definitely deserve to be on the main card, and they put on a show. That was a good fight to get the night started off on UFC Fight Pass. I agree with everything you guys said. Haley, the experience I think played out, and he was ready to go deep into the fight. He looked great, man. It was a good fight for him to kind of get back on the winning side of things and bounce back from a loss and get 2024 started off right.
Yeah, no, Rick, I did want to ask, obviously the situation was not great for why it had to be moved up to the main card, but are you happy that that's the fight that ended up opening up the night?
Yeah.
The main card?
Yeah, absolutely. And we initially had that fight slated as a swing bout, and in that particular sense, we meant it was either going to be the last fight that was going to be shown on the Facebook broadcast or the first fight of the main card. So, that was, as soon as we lost the Duma fight, there was no question as to which one we were going to move up. And, just one thing I want to add to it too is Medeiros knew exactly, like their camp knew exactly what they were getting into with Haley. They did a ton of film study, and even before they accepted the fight. So I like working with guys like that because Haley's got a losing record, right? He's 2-3 going into the fight, but the 2 guys he beat, we talked about it before, Richie Santiago, contender series vet, Justin Valentin, right? Like just fought for a belt locally. And, most of the guys that he's lost to, it's the only guy that he's lost to that has any losses is Casey Norton. And everybody knows how good Casey is, right? So yeah, like most camps would look at it and say, well, I mean, this guy's a savage. He's 2-3, but but why would we want to, so the risk versus reward, like if they went out and beat him, all of a sudden it would look, you beat a guy that, that came in 2 and 3. The thing that I really like about Josh and about that camp is they were looking at it like, throw the records aside, we want to fight a guy that's going to give us this type of fight, like someone that's going to give us this type of test. And, the same can be said about a lot of the guys on the card. There were some guys that were fighting people with lopsided records who are way tougher than their record. I'm sure we're going to talk about some of those fights. And I like working with guys like that. It makes it easier to match the cards because I can just focus on matching compelling fights in terms of compelling what's going to happen in the cage. I don't have to focus as much on, well, this 2-0 guy needs to fight a guy that's like, instead of asking for, hey, find me a guy that's 3-1 that can't fight, that's a bunch of bums, give me the tough guy with a 500 record. So, that's one thing. I just want to shout out all the guys on the card, everybody that we booked. I mean, they were a pleasure to work with on this one. And, nobody tortured me from a matchmaking standpoint.
That's good, Rick.
As much as they usually do. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. One thing to add on just about this fight, and then we can move on to the next one, is I just keep on getting more impressed every card I watch with these flyweights in New England, man. I mean, these 125ers, it's such a great division to watch. I know there's not a ton of them, but the quality is there, man. Our 125ers are good. That fight showed a couple of them. Like we said, we got Justin Valentin, Mitch Raposo, you got Harris Bonfiglio. There's a whole list of great flyweights in New England, and it's a fun division to watch. I know one of the other promotions is hosting a championship fight. Harris Bonfiglio's in that one. Tyler Smythe is another great flyweight. Man, it's a fun division,
Yeah, one of the other flyweights in the region were there in attendance as well, Joe Poirier, and I know he kind of had his eye on that. He had his eye on that matchup that night. So even if he was getting in there with Adrian Haley, that would be a scrap as well too. So there's a lot of fun fights that you can make at flyweight for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's right.
Problem is a lot of them train together, so that's what makes it tough.
That too.
You can't get most of them in the cage together because they all cross train.
I know Justin.
There's a lot of them.
Justin and Harris cross train. Joe Poirier and Mitch cross train. I know Casey Norton's been involved in a couple camps with some guys too. That's a fact, Rick.
Yeah, Lazoya trains with just about all. Oh yeah,
with the cartel. Yeah,
and he was with Lozon for a while, and up at the cartel, and Tim Flores trains with some of those guys too, and So there's a lot of good ones. It'd be great if we could do some sort of tournament, but the problem is they all, they know
train
each other
together.
They all train together, know each other. So same thing with 135. It's a division that's got a whole bunch of tough guys locally, and but a lot of them know each other pretty well, and either work out with each other or have worked out. So
definitely, yeah. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about a fight that a lot of people were anticipating, a fight that really did blow off the roof in that arena. Man, Cam Resniski, Kyle Hill. Cam Resniski stepped up on 4 days' notice. Kyle Hill came into the fight 1-0 and Cam 3-0. But man, it delivered. I thought it was going to be more of I thought it was going to go a little bit longer. But I saw Cam 4 days' notice is a tough fight to step up on. But I think he really did put out all the energy he had. I talked to him after the fight. He said, "Man, I saw the moments where I could have finished the fight, but I just didn't have the energy." And very understandable. But we also have to give a lot of respect to Kyle Hill, Nostro's MMA. Man, what a performance from bell to bell, really. From when the fight started to when he finished the fight. I had a fun time watching him. He definitely impressed me, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do on this regional scene. And hopefully he has a great career himself. But that fight was also a great main card, contestant, or a great addition once Cam signed. I think it was a great fight, even though he came in on 4 days' notice, 3-0. He's got an undefeated record. He did coming into the fight, and he gave a great fight. 4 days' notice against a guy as tough as that is a real tough fight. So respect to both men, Kyle Hill for the finish and Cam Resniski for stepping up.
I mean, after this performance, I mean, I'm just going to say it how it is. Kyle Hill might be one of the best prospects coming out of the New England area. I mean, he looked so good in all areas. His striking was on point, and as soon as it got to the ground, he was comfortable. He was throwing elbows off his back. He sunk in the choke for the win.
He knew what to do.
He looked so good. And we talked about this when we were at the event, but you never see prospects versus prospects. You never see two guys undefeated records since their amateur careers and putting it all on the line out there, especially on 4 days' notice. So just a big salute to Cam Rosniewski for doing that, and a big salute to Kyle Hill for just having, I mean, one of the better performances I've seen from a prospect in a while against another dangerous prospect.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I think definitely like Cam taking that fight and how quickly that kind of came together for those two guys, where there didn't seem like there was much hesitation for either of them to really accept that fight. I think that when you see guys 3-0 and a guy that's 1-0, like you guys said, it's really rare to see people like that fight, never mind making a fight like that on short notice as well. So I was very impressed once the fight got booked that these are the two guys that we were going to see. And then, yeah, Kyle Hill kind of really stole the show for me for the most part when it came to the entirety of the card. There's a lot of great performances, but for me, it was always him that kind of stands out in the back of my mind. I think every aspect of the game, he was so good the entire night. Whichever way the fight went, he was kind of having the advantages in all the exchanges. You know, maybe if Cam was on a full camp, maybe the fight would have played out different, but, you know, we do have to judge it based on what cards were dealt. So props to both men. Definitely excited to see where Kyle Hill now fits into this landscape of these 170 pound guys that are in New England now, because there's so many of them that just keep winning and all of them keep kind of lifting each other up. And then when you put them all on a pedestal, you look at how good all of them are, man, like there's some real serious fights to be made in 2024 for these guys. And I think a win like that from Kyle just kind of elevates him right into that conversation with all those top guys. So yeah, I was very impressed by that performance. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, just about everything he threw landed.
Yeah.
Like every exchange, like he was so accurate just from, I mean, it must have been 15 seconds into the fight when he landed that first big hook. And it was like, it just everything. It was just all downhill from there. It just kept rolling, you know, and every punch it seemed like every time he'd get in close and throw a combination, something would hurt him. And it was as good as I've ever seen anybody look that early in their career. And I mean, he's young too.
Yeah.
You know, like he's not one of those, you know, a guy that's a prospect, you know, because, you know, he's only got a handful of fights. Like, I mean, Kyle's truly, I think he's 22.
Yeah.
And, you know, and even on the ground, I mean, as you said, there were a lot of good exchanges on the ground, but I mean, he hit a real nice sweep. You know, I believe that was towards
butterfly sweep. Yeah.
End of round one. And, I mean, he was just all over him, you know, everything he did was, and, you know, the other thing too is he's small for 70. Like he's got a good frame and he's got a nice long reach, but I mean, they ended up going with a catch weight of 75 based on the short notice, and Kyle still got on the scale at like 71.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to his coaches, and he was at like 176, like 10 days out. You know, and he, you know, he was even lighter as they got a little closer. So I mean, there was almost no weight cut for him. So if he decides you know, I mean, he on a full fight camp, you could make 155. You know,
probably
Oh, easily. I mean, if he's walking around at 76, half the guys on the card, you know, the guys that are fighting at 55 are walking around at 76 2 weeks out. So, you know, it's just, you know, you got to see, is he going to grow into that 170-pound frame, or is he, as he starts to ratchet up the competition, is he a guy that's potentially going to look to drop a weight class? You know, and that'll
be a good question.
Be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I think at 70 he'd be real good, fill into the frame, like you said, Rick. At 55, man, he'd be a dog, a killer. Especially with the reach that he has. I would like, I mean, maybe even early in his career, he tries 55. If he don't like it, he can move back up to 70. But I think it would be worth his while to fight at 55 at least a little bit, see how he feels and performs.
Yeah, or at the very least, just try a test cut in the gym. You know, see if just, you know, after one of your fight camps or something, like when you're in good shape, you know, try to suck out some of that water weight and see how you feel the next day. You know, it's because I mean, him at 55 would be crazy.
Absolutely.
Is he a guy that you're looking to have on that next May card?
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, he's a guy I'm looking to have on every card when he's fighting in New England.
Yeah.
And it's
a good decision though.
And it won't be very long.
It would be,
looking as good as he is. I mean, how long is he going to be around here?
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure No Sus will be getting a lot of phone calls about him this year for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good guy to want to raise as a Combat FC fighter. Start from he made his professional debut with you guys now, and his second fight in his career now. I feel like is the perfect guy to kind of raise under the banner.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I did want to throw things off a little bit. Talk about another fight on the card. Dan Cormier versus Giuliano. Man, what a fight! Giuliano came into the fight with a like 2-4 record, if I'm not mistaken, like a kind of inexperienced guy, David Giuliano. Yeah, I got him right here. He came into the fight 2-4. I'm lucky. I wanted this fight capped off the night, right? This was the very last fight of the evening.
Second to last.
Yeah.
Second to last.
Yep.
Yeah, this was a fight that made me super glad I stayed all night, to be honest. Dan Cormier came into the fight 10-10, and we know he's a guy who he'll handle himself against anybody. He's there for a dog fight. He's a real tough competitor. David Giuliano came into the fight kind of like the back against the wall, right? You got both guys are they're looking for a big win. He's got a guy with a ton of experience on his hands, and he performed. He put on for the fans. I talked to him earlier today. He said he had a great time fighting up there in the Shriners Auditorium. He got his second round knockout, so he was super thrilled with that. And he even said that New England fans are some of the most fun to fight around, which was super impressive. You don't hear that too often. But man, I was glad to hear that because it says something about the culture that Combat FC is building up there in Wilmington, and the fight fans and the overall kind of culture, I would say, and just being there on fight night. It's a fun show. You guys packed in the house. It was full house, and I'm glad that these fighters had a good time fighting up there.
Yeah, and Dan Cormier retired after this fight, which was a shame to see because, he's kind of a staple in New England MMA. I mean, everyone makes fun of, the fact that his name is Dan Cormier and there was the UFC's Dan Cormier. And I've known him for a bit and I've just kept up with his career and everything. And it just sucks to see that he's calling it off of a loss, especially. But David Giuliano became the second guy to knock out Dan Cormier. And it was in 2014, the last time that he was knocked out. So it's pretty impressive that he was, able to go out there and put him away when most guys haven't in the New England MMA scene. Cormier's been around that was his 21st fight, and that's only the second time he was stopped by strikes. So very impressive performance out of a guy who was just 2-4 coming in David Giuliano.
And just to add one thing, Dan Cormier, he has a huge, extensive boxing background. So, to go out there and knock out more or less a boxer, or at least a guy who has a heavy boxing style, man, that's a good win for you. You know what I mean? Hats off to David Giuliano, and also a lot of respect to Dan Cormier for hanging him up. And I wish him well in his retirement. He was super fun to watch around here.
Yeah, definitely glad that we were able to be there, although it was his retirement. It's nice that we were able to be there and witness that. And it's just a testament to why people shouldn't leave events early or, kind of dip out early. I'm glad that we ended up sticking around and staying for the entire event, because something like that is something that you'll look back on and remember of someone that's been such a staple in the New England MMA scene. So yeah, I'm definitely glad to have been there, and shout out to Giuliano. He looked great. Pat, as you mentioned, man, only the second guy to finish him to strike. So it's a great accomplishment on his record as well, man. So I'm glad we were there for that one. And the people that missed out, sucks to suck.
Yeah, it was a fun fight. That was one that it's tough because, we wish everything could be on the main card, right? But we booked so many fights that, usually we lose a lot. I booked the same amount of fights for this one as we booked for our prior events. And usually we end up at 12 or 13 with how many people get hurt. And, the last event was cursed. We ended up with like 9 fights, but, we started at the same amount. And this one we ended up at 16 on fight night. So yeah, that's one that, I wish we could have had on the main card. Dan's a great guy. He's someone that, like, we're both into bow hunting. And so like, there's been, we'll just message each other, trail camera pictures of deer, like, so he's a guy that I just chat with, and, even outside of fighting, and he's always been a super nice guy. And when I met Giuliano, I mean, he was equally nice. I mean, he was a real personable guy. He was, just easy to be around, and no ego there, and he was cool. He was one of those guys. He was cracking jokes. I enjoyed talking to him. So you hate to see either guy lose, so it was good on him for picking up the knockout. And it's like you said, sad to see Dan go, but he went out on his terms.
That's right. Well, like we said, great fight. Hats off to Dan Cormier for his impressive career. He went in there with some absolute dogs throughout his career. Respect to him. I hope he enjoys retirement, and hopefully he goes and gets him some nice deer, Rick. That would be cool. And get some more hunting time in the woods. Now let's move into another fight that happened on the main card. There you go. Patrick Benson versus Romano Medina. Quite a fight here, guys. I was impressed by, honestly, both guys. These guys I hadn't seen Patrick Benson fight on the New England scene. I'd seen Romano Medina fight here. And I had a fun time watching that fight. I thought that both guys showed up, and they really, their skills were impressive to me. Just the overall great fight, something I had fun watching. The groundwork of Patrick Benson when he got the guillotine was pretty impressive. And honestly, he came into the fight as, I would say, an underdog, right? He was there as a guy that everybody thought would, he'd probably put on a fight, but who knew? Nobody thought he would. I don't think many people thought he would win. Romano Medina, he's a young guy. He's really tough, and I was really impressed by Patrick Benson. His groundwork, first round finish. What a fight, and a good win for him too.
Yeah, I mean, Romano Medina was 8-0 between his amateur and pro career. He hadn't lost yet in MMA, and Patrick Benson was able to submit him. And if I'm not mistaken, Medina has a black belt or a very high belt in jiu-jitsu. So the fact that Patrick Benson was able to pull off that like modified guillotine from like while he was on bottom side control, that has to be one of the craziest submissions I've ever seen in person, because I've never seen a guillotine finish from side control like that. We all were sitting there and we were like, oh, it's not locked in, and we stopped recording on our phones, and then he tapped and we were like, wait, we missed the finish, what happened? No, none of us actually thought the choke was as deep as it was, and it was just really cool to see, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. We were definitely, I know we were all kind of standing in the same spot, cage side, and it was like our reaction live was pretty crazy, because we didn't think that it was sunk in there very deep. And Medina was throwing the body punches to the side, obviously trying to loosen it up, but it didn't look from our vantage point that it was completely locked in. And all of a sudden we see him just tap, really quickly. So it was just like a crazy finish to watch from our perspective, for sure. And, you mentioned it, Medina coming in 2-0. I think people were very high on him. So shout out to Benson for pulling off the W and getting that upset win, man. And he was very, on the mic, he was very, he was talking about how like now you should start talking about him in this region and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty cool. Kind of put his name back on the map, which was good. And just shout out to both those guys, man. That finish was definitely crazy, man.
Yeah, it was interesting how he got it. So he didn't quite get to side controlled. Benson was able to actually trap one of the legs, and he had the neck kind of cranked too. So it was, kind of not your typical guillotine choke, but yeah, it was interesting. It was really tight, obviously, where, Romano's not an easy guy to tap. And that's similar to the Haley fight. Benson's a guy that's a lot tougher than his record. Yep. That's what Romano and their team was looking for. They weren't expecting a trash can coming in from out of state, right? So there were some people that were calling it, this is an easy fight. Romano's got an easy fight coming up. I'm like, he doesn't have an easy fight. I mean, that kid wrestled in college. He's a purple belt or a brown belt. The kid can box. I'm like, this isn't an easy fight, and Romano knew it wasn't an easy fight. Their camp knew what they were training for. So, it was a good little scrap, and Patrick's a guy that I'm sure we'll see him out here again.
Yeah. Rick, you like to put together these fights where you got a guy and, you know, you think we think we're going to get a very entertaining fight. We think we kind of like, I can sometimes put 2 and 2 together and feel like, all right, this guy probably has the advantage here and this guy has the advantage here. But some of these fights just go so unplanned and just finish in crazy ways. I like to call them sleeper fights. They're not quite like the definition of a sleeper, but dude, like some of these fights, nobody expected anything to happen. We're going to talk about a few more coming up here, but dude, like some of the most crazy finishes that you would have never imagined, or just performances that we didn't expect. Like, and the funny thing is, when we talked to Rick, he's like, yeah, I kind of knew that was going to happen. Like, this is why. And I just think the matchmaking and the amount of thought that you put into these fights is super impressive, because these are all, you know, you're telling us these things, and these are all things that, you know, well, booking the fight and put, you know, your matchmaker math, things that go into the equation. And dude, your matchmaking is second to none. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I said it on, I forget whose podcast it was, but I just like to book stuff that I want to watch, you know? So if I've seen guys fight and, you know, I look at, you know, you kind of get a feel for who they are and what they're good at. And kind of regardless of their record, you can just, you know, you can look at it and figure out, hey, this will be a fun fight if we put this guy and this guy. And, you know, the hardest part is getting him to, you know, like to say yes.
Yeah.
You know, that's the hard part, because some of the guys, you know, they have a very different view of what they want and what they're looking for in their career. And they'd much rather, you know, fight, you know, like a guy that we've had on a couple of our cards is Sage Philippe, or
he's
you know, Aaron Trussell.
Yeah.
It's tough to get those guys fights, right? Because they're, you know, their records are about 500, but they're tough as shit, right?
Dude, they're real good.
Yeah, so you don't have too many guys that are, you know, up and coming prospects who are like, you know, give me the 4-4 guy that's tough as shit, right? So it's, but I find the more that I offer these fights, I mean, on our first card back, one of the fights that I had was Senator Moody and Sage, you know, and it was, you know, they were 1-1 and 1-2 at the time, but both guys were way better than that, you know, like as we've seen them fight since then. And, you know, I remember when I offered him the fight, it's like, holy shit, they both accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're in business here, you know.
Yeah.
And same thing with, you know, I mean, obviously for a different reason, but I was surprised that both Kyle Hill and Cam Rosniski said yes when they did. So, you know, I offer, you know, there's a lot of fights that I offer that I look at it and I think, you know, if I was managing these guys, I'd probably, you know, I don't know that I would ask for this exact fight. But you never, you know, everybody's looking for something different. So, you know, I offer the fights that I want to see, and sometimes I get lucky, you know, and if I offer enough of them, you know, offer enough good fights to enough people, we end up with a really stacked card. So it's, yeah.
I think more or less the fan in you, and like just the fact that you say you want to see these fights, so you book them. That's the math right there. That's the rhyme and reason why we get such good fights, right? If you're a guy, you know, you're not thinking about anything else other than like, all right, I want to see, you know, regardless of why, you know, amateur careers, professional careers, finishes that you've seen, I want to see this guy versus that guy. That is a great way to do it, man. Instead of looking at just records and other, you know, ways to book fights, just thinking about guys that you've watched and guys that you want to see fight. That's a perfect way to do it.
Yeah. And one thing too, I want to mention, I don't ever sell anybody on fights. That's one thing that I make, you know, I go out of my way not to try to tell, like if I reach out, you know, when I reached out to Tyson about the Cam Rosniski fight,
mm-hmm.
and I said, hey, I've got this guy, you know, because Cam had lost the fight a couple weeks earlier. And, you know, I didn't call Tyson up and start, hey, this is a real good fight for Cam. I said, Kyle's tough as shit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, he's really good. Here's the link to his last fight. He won by head kick knockout over a guy that apparently was undefeated in Muay Thai, like brown belt in jiu-jitsu, the kick and fight.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that's what you know, and so I'm always honest with everybody about it. And
more power to you.
I find that gets people to ultimately, like, I feel like I end up booking more of these fights because I'm not full of shit when I talk to these guys, you know. And it's yeah, so I don't know, that's kind of been my approach with a lot of it.
That's
Is
good.
just be honest. And, you know, if guys have fought for us before, I've got all the videos in a Google Drive, right? So if there's a coach that's like, I'm not familiar with this guy, well, take a look at his tape. Here's, you know, here's one of his fights with us. You know, every fight, you can find fights on everybody. Everybody that I talk to is like, oh yeah, I watched 7 of his fights. So, you know, it's not like I'm giving them secret information that they can't find.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah,
Rick, I got one more question for you before we bounce to the next fight, because you just mentioned it, sparked the thought. When I was talking to David Giuliano earlier today, he was asking me, and I wasn't sure the answer, so I'm glad I have you now to ask you. So his fight wasn't on Facebook, and it also wasn't on Fight Pass. It was one of the other prelims. He wanted to know if there's any way he can access his fight to watch it back, if it is on YouTube or anything like that. So while we're at it, man, if there were some fights that weren't on Fight Pass or weren't on Facebook, where can those fights be located? I'm sure it's probably in the works still.
So yeah, they will be on our YouTube page. And basically what happens is our production team films everything.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, when they're filming everything in, you know, whatever resolution they're booking it in, right? Or, you know, videoing it in, it's, for them to actually upload the whole thing, it would be like a massive file that would cost $1 billion to store on Google, right? So he has to go out and compress it, and then he chops it into fights and clips for me. And so ultimately I'll end up getting you know, in my Google Drive, I'll have all the fights, I'll have a bunch of clips, but it takes a little while to do it because they, you know, they have other events that they do too. And, you know, they had to fly home to Florida. So, I would say by the end of the week, I'll probably start seeing some of those clips flow in, and we start posting them to YouTube as soon as we have them. So
perfect. Great. I'm glad we were able to
get before we move on. I do want to say I have a message from Patrick Benson, and he just said that hopefully he'll have some more big opportunities coming soon in the future. So you heard him, Rick. Give him some more big opportunities in the future, man. He deserves it after that performance.
Yeah, his manager, I was on the phone with his managers today. So yeah, absolutely. We were going to have Patrick back, actually, the card before last, but the timing just wasn't going to work for him. So yeah, we made sure to get him on this one. So he's a guy you'll see often. I mean, if I have somebody in the weight class that makes sense for him, he's one of my first calls. So
love it.
That's awesome. Good to hear. Well, I didn't get to clip out the actual poster for this fight. It was a fight that really stood out to me, though, and I wanted to bring it up. It was Jay Bakanowski versus Anthony Pike. Anthony Pike had kind of like a little stretch where he kept on coming up short, right? He kept on almost like gassing out. A lot of people, I saw someone call him like a 1-round wrestler, right? His wrestling would last 1 round, and then he would kind of lose his gas tank. But man, when he got this job done and the bell rang in the 3rd round, something that'll always stand out to me, something I'll never forget about. Anthony Pike went to his corner, he flexed both arms and said, "I did it." And that was something that really stood out to me because you could tell how hard he'd been working to be able to go longer and deeper into fights. And he wanted to show that night. And so much respect for being able to do that, where, you know, you kept on coming up short. You kept on kind of losing that momentum after the 1st, 2nd round. This fight came in, dominated for 3 rounds, great fight. And, you know, that was just a really respectable moment. I noticed his heart in that moment, if that makes sense. And it was just super cool to see. I'm happy he was able to do that. And that helps his mindset so much. Hopefully next fight, he's ready to do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. We talked about Anthony Pike a bit before the card as someone that was actually like a lot better than his record showed. I mean, he went to the fight, I think it was 0-4, but if you actually like look at his record, he's won fights that were considered exhibitions because it was a one-night tournament. And some of the guys he lost to, like he lost to a Contender Series vet, he lost to one of the better prospects out of Combat FC right now, Artur Minev, and it's just like he got the short end of the stick a bunch. He really did. And it was really just good to see him get that win. You could tell how happy he was when they raised his hand for that decision in the cage, and he deserved it. I mean, he had a very solid performance where he kind of just kept his foot on the gas the entire fight and just wore out his opponent.
Yeah, for sure. Those were a couple of guys that I wasn't maybe too familiar with going into the event, but I remember in our preview show, it might have been on air or it might have been after the fact, but Rick was talking very highly about Pike and both Bakanowski, both being super tough dudes that a lot of guys in the area don't typically want to fight them given their record and also how tough they are. Kind of falls into that category again. So yeah, once, I heard that from Rick, and this is a fight that obviously sparked my interest, and I definitely think it lived up to the hype, and you could definitely tell how tough both those guys were. So props to Pike for getting in there and getting that W, man, like you guys already mentioned earlier. But yeah, he's deserved it, man. I was super happy to see him be happy with the result and the victory. So yeah, I was definitely happy for both those guys, man. It was a great fight for sure.
Yeah, they're both awesome guys. They're two of the nicest guys on the card, and just a little bit of background on both guys, right? So the first 3 guys that Pike fought that weren't exhibitions were all black belts in jiu-jitsu. And most of those fights were short notice. So I actually met him when I needed an opponent on like 10 days notice for Senate Armudi, who's a 6'4" black belt who choked out Billy Goff in the amateurs.
Wow.
Like they're like, and we're not talking like 10 years ago amateurs. Like it's, and it was, Armudi's awesome. And his original, he actually lost multiple opponents. And Armudi had beaten Sage on the show prior. And, I was asking, Jason Franklin, I said, do you know anybody that would be a decent fight with Armudi? Do you know anyone that would fight him on short notice? And he gave me Pike's contact info. And, we started talking then. And, he's a guy that I'm sure we'll have out, more times. That was his 3rd fight with us. And, and then he fought Artur Manev, who's one of the better prospects I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's incredible, and Pike gave him some trouble in that first round. It was a good fight until Manev really started to land. And just on Bakanowski, his last fight with us was a co-main event fighting Jake Bone. Yeah. And it was a back and forth fight. Jay had him hurt bad in the first round. He dropped him with a punch, almost got him out of there. And then Jake Bone took over and won a unanimous decision. So, and we've seen Jacob Bone fighting some of the best guys in the area, right? So if Bakanowski's in the same vicinity as Jacob Bone and Anthony Pike just did that to him, it's like, that's the thing. There are some of these guys in other parts of the country that are savages, that just, their records are lopsided. And, and I know, Jay was coming off ACL surgery, and I think he hurt the, he's had some sort of hamstring issue early in the fight, but I mean, it wasn't like, 5 seconds in, he blew out his knee. I mean, he was, he was struggling, but he was still kind of in the fight, and Pike did absolutely everything that he needed to do. I mean, he won every round. He looked great.
He did, truly.
Yeah, he's a tough guy, and again, hard to match that kid, right? Like, because after seeing how good the guy can wrestle, unless you're someone that is comfortable off your back, like, are you saying yes to the 1-4 guy that just out wrestled Jay Bakanowski? I mean, probably not.
Right. Yeah, that's a good. That's what I mean. Like, the little intricate things within these fights is crazy. Like the way that these fights get matched up. And you're right, Rick. He's gonna have a hard time getting fights, which is crazy. But the wrestling and this performance right here, it shows that he's getting better and better, working on the things that were holding him back and hindering him just a little bit. And that's what people look for in this sport. That's super important and super respectable as well.
Yeah, and just one quick thing too. He took a flight out, I think at 6 a.m. the next day. Wow. Because he wanted to get back to Arizona because his wrestling team had regionals or something like that. So he had to get back for some tournament, and so wins his fist fight, wakes up at 4 a.m. to take a flight back home, and then lands, rushes over there, and he's on the mat.
He's from Oklahoma, isn't he?
Arizona.
Oh yeah, you said that before. Wasn't there a guy from Oklahoma on the card? Maybe
nobody that flew in from Oklahoma. Maybe someone that lived there at some point. But
okay.
But yeah, so I don't know. They're both really good guys. Like both Pike and Bakanowski are awesome guys. So it was, it's another one that sucks to see either guy lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a fight. Glad that Anthony Pike was able to kind of work on the things that were holding him back and get better, get this victory. That was a huge win for him. And especially, you know, if he got the job done in the first round, then it really wouldn't have been so much of a testament to his cardio. But being able to do it for 3 rounds, grind him out, and really just stay dominant was impressive. And that's how you know he's getting better. So with that being said, we will move on to our next fight. Very, very fun fight too. Let's get it up there. Chris Dissanel versus Carlos Lazoya. Chris Dissanel is a really game opponent. I mean, I've seen him in there with some absolute dogs. We talked about that preview show. He's just a bantamweight that takes pretty much any fight, and usually he's there for the duration of it, and he does really well most of the time. In this case, Carlos Lazoya came in. Carlos Lazoya has been training with Connor Matthews and Tyson Chartier with the New England Cartel, so I was expecting a big performance from him. But man, what a choke, and just a testament to what he's doing right now, having great guys around him, getting better and better. He put it out, put on a show, and I honestly thought that fight was going to be a dog fight, like real close, and it probably would have been if it went any longer. Carlos Lazoya just was able to sink in that choke at the right moment, pretty early in the fight. But if that fight went longer and both guys really got into it and really started banging, I've seen Chris Dissanel throw some bombs in the cage with some guys like the Mike Kimball TKO was super impressive, but Carlos Lazoya did his thing quick, and like I said, if that fight went any longer, it would have been super fun. So no matter what, I was expecting a good fight. Didn't know how it was going to go, but hats off to Carlos Lazoya for getting that quick finish, first round, and like I said, testament to what he's doing with the great people around him.
Yeah, I mean, Lazoya is he just kind of went in there and did what he wanted with Dissanel, which was kind of crazy to see because we've seen Dissanel go like almost 15 minutes with Jalen Bates. We've seen him go 24 minutes basically with Charalampos Grigoriou.
Yeah.
And he's went like deep into these fights with some killers, man. And Lazoya just said, nope, I'm just going to take you out of here as quick as possible. And he, like I said, he just did what he wanted in this fight. I mean, it really felt like there wasn't too much resistance from Dissanel. Lazoya was just the better man that night, and he just kind of proved it very quickly.
Yeah,
for
didn't
sure.
expect to see it like that. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you're good, man. It's not a secret that like Carlos Lazoya's bread and butter is his jiu-jitsu. I know he's a very high level jiu-jitsu guy. So the fact that going into a fight with Carlos, knowing that that's his bread and butter, and he was still able to get you out of there in that time frame was very impressive. Given the guy that we know that Chris Dissanel is, who, like you guys have mentioned, hung around there with some of the best, and is able to fight, 5 rounds if need be. So I was super impressed with Carlos's performance. I know going into the fight, he had a ton of respect for Chris as well, and he always said he labeled him as just like a really gritty guy. Everything about Chris Dissanel to him just was labeled as like a tough, gritty dude. So to see Carlos go in there, get a first round submission, use that jiu-jitsu that he knows is his bread and butter, and I think even from him going into the fight, he knew his easiest path to victory here was to get his hands on him and start working that jiu-jitsu. So props to Carlos. I was happy to see that, we mentioned it in the preview show as well, that this was his first fight in New England. He's always doing a lot of traveling for his fights and has a hard time even finding people to come corner him, never mind people to be there to support him in the building. So was happy to see that he had the support and all those guys from the cartel in his corner as well. So yeah, shout out to Carlos Lazoya, man. Happy to see him back in the win column for sure. And I'm excited to see what's next for him in this, flyweight division. I know this was kind of a catch weight at 130, but I know he typically is a 25er. So hopefully the next time we see him, we can start seeing him kind of work his way into that 25-pound division.
Yeah, and so this one was actually a 35. So he moved all the way up to 35 to fight Dissanel. Wow. And yeah, that was one that when I was talking to his manager when we were initially looking to book him, they said, we'll do 25 or 35. They were just looking to get on a card up here. He was under contract with Fury for a while and was out of that contract and is looking to fight up here now. And Chris was hitting me up for a fight right around the same time, and it made a lot of sense. And it was, then again, another one of those fights that just I had a feeling it was going to be a good one, based on their styles. And When I saw them face to face though at the weigh-in, I was like, oh shit, like maybe I fucked up here, because Chris looked like he was so much bigger than Carlos.
Yeah.
And maybe Chris had his shoes on and Carlos didn't, but it was like when I looked at him and I was like, man, we're not supposed to have a height difference of like 4 inches at 135, like Chris looked meaningfully bigger. But yeah, as you said, Carlos went in there and I mean, he just did just about whatever he wanted. He looked awesome.
Yeah.
It's the fastest anyone's ever finished Chris. Chris has only been stopped once in the first round, and it was on strikes, right? So this is the first time he's ever been submitted early. And yeah, Carlos looked great, man. We tried to kind of tee him up for like, hey, what do you want to do next? And he, didn't catch the cues from Rico there.
Yeah.
So, right. We'll have to be a little more explicit next time. But I mean, yeah, he's a guy that, with the Army background, it kind of makes sense for our next card. So, and I mean, we'd want to have him regardless of that. But I mean, I think the military vet on Memorial Day weekend is that's a fun thing too. But yeah, Carlos is a guy you'll see on our cards a lot now moving forward.
That's great, man. Good to hear. Yeah, like you guys said, it's awesome for Carlos Lozoya, because he was kind of one of those guys he really didn't have much going for him when he moved up here and really made the transition. Like Chris said, having a hard time getting guys in his corner, which is kind of crazy to hear. Just stuff like that. And training partners, like it was a huge transition for him now that he's kind of making his mark and easing into not really easing, but really jumping into the team of fire over there with the cartel. He's got the right people with him, and it's just a great thing to see, because a guy who was suffering a little bit with having a hard time adjusting and finding people, now he's with the best in the area, which is awesome for him. And it just goes to show that the cartel, Connor Matthews, Mom's Basement, all that work, man, is paying off. And I think that was one of Connor Matthews' first guys that he's been working with super hard to get a big win like that. One of the first ones to get in the cage. He's been training with Joe Poirier and Valdina, but this is a real young guy right here who Connor Matthews has put a lot of time into, and great to see that for him. It just goes to show that what they're doing over there is working. The stuff that they're teaching Carlos Lozoya and putting him through is working. So it's good to see that he's got a great community around him, and it's all paying off for him now.
Yeah, and he was on a tough 2-fight losing streak coming into this fight after being on a 6-fight winning streak against some very solid competition. And I was talking to him after the fight, and he said he wants to make it 7 this time. He wants to go on a 7-fight winning streak this time and really just stamp his name and prove he still has that fire inside of him.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's going to be good. He was a guy, we didn't even mention him when we were talking about all the great 125ers, but man, for him, when he gets down to 125, he's going to be right in that mix. What's crazy to me too is these 125ers that we were talking about. Like if you put them together, you probably have a solid 8 of them that you can make a tournament out of. Mitch Raposo is the most experienced one, and Mitch has 10 fights, 9 fights. These guys are so young in their careers. These 125ers are really gnarly. Like most of them have an average of 5-6 fights at most. So that's crazy that we have just such tough guys that are so good at a young age, and that's what you want, right? Because you don't want to have a bunch of 32-year-old guys, 34-year-old guys. The young crop of flyweights is just amazing that we have right here, young, and they're building experience together. They're all growing and getting fights at the same time. They're all going to end up, when one has 10 fights, all of them are going to have 10 fights. When one has 15 fights, they're all going to have 15 fights.
Great way of putting it.
Yeah.
All right, so it sure is. And 170 is impressing me more and more as well. But with that being said, I'm going to click the button on this one, guys. This fight sure did deliver the co-main event. I had to blow up another version of a poster here. So here we are with Don Shanis and Damian Nelson. What a fight. I'm going to let you guys start it off, and I'll kind of sum it up at the end. But, man, Damian Nelson sure did impress me. I was super impressed by that fight. And I also did, kind of know his power is there. This is a tough fight for Don. Don is very experienced. He's seen it all. But when you have a guy who could throw that hard, that much, and that quick, It's a tough fight for anybody. Damian Nelson sure did have the power, and he executed whatever game plan it was. I don't know if it was just to go brawl and try to knock him out. He started off hot on the feet. He kept his momentum going, and he never looked for any sort of takedowns or anything. He just an awesome masterpiece, masterclass of a performance that night on the feet, man. I was super impressed by his striking. But go ahead, Pat.
I think Damian Nelson just shocked everyone, honestly. I mean, a lot of people coming in said, we know his record is not as good as the fighter he is. He's a better fighter than his record shows. Yet he's still coming in the fight on a 3-fight losing streak, and he's fighting a former UFC vet. You can't give him too much of a chance at a 500 record. And then he just goes in there and dominates the fight with his boxing. Don's takedowns were just not working, and Damian was just pushing him off with ease. And I asked him before the fight in the press conference about his defensive work and his slickness on the feet and just how his defense kind of works with that. And he said that he thought it would be a big factor in the fight. And I mean, it definitely was. Don wasn't able to land on him consistently. He wasn't able to get the takedowns. Damian kind of just had his way with the boxing and ended up dropping and rocking Don a few times, and then did it again later in the fight and got that 3rd round TKO. I mean, you can't ask for a better performance on short notice for someone that has a 500 record. I mean, we talked to Rick after the event, and I think he said he was going to give him the performance of the night or them the fight of the night, and it's deservedly so, because, I mean, Damian went in there and did what a lot of people think wasn't possible.
Right, man. And even pre-fight, Don had highlighted that he knew that Damian's boxing was probably the highlight of his game, and the fact that Damian was able to use that specific aspect of his game to really dictate the pace and dominate the entire fight from bell to bell was super impressive. Pat, you did mention that, with the record and people looking at Don as like the former UFC vet, and, this being a short notice fight, and Don was supposed to fight Garib, but instead he's fighting a 4-4 Damian Nelson. I think people were kind of looking at this fight from like a skewed angle. But when you really kind of break it down inch by inch, you could see that Damian was able to do all the things that he's good at, and he really used that to his advantage. And Don was really trying to, once he realized that he was getting outstruck by Damian, he was really trying hard to get his hands on him and get the fight to the ground, where he does his best work from top control and landing that ground and pound that he's known for. And the fact that Damian was kind of just negating everything that Don was trying to do to him and still capitalize and, finish it the way that he did in the 3rd round was super impressive. So aside from Kyle Hill, it was Kyle Hill and Damian Nelson for me that had the 2 biggest, most impressive performances on this entire card. And yeah, man, just a hell of a performance by Damian Nelson, man. It was a good one for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he looked about as good as you could look. I mean, this what more can you say about it? He looked awesome.
I mean, flawless.
In 20 fights, nobody had stopped Don Shainis with strikes.
Yeah.
His entire career, pro or amateur. It's the first time he's ever been knocked out. I mean, it was, and he fought some hammers in the UFC. So I knew the fight was going to be good. I knew that it wasn't, the lopsided fight that some people thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I wasn't expecting Don to get knocked out. I mean, I had a feeling it was going to be close. But yeah, Damian looked good. He looked real good. And Shainis, to his credit, I mean, he got hit hard early in that fight, and he just kept coming.
He did.
And he got hit with that illegal knee that he kind of just brushed right off. That was a hard knee. I had that knee on video, and I mean, he got blocked with that knee while both of his knees were on the ground, and he kind of just there was never a thought that the fight was going to be stopped. Don immediately went over, said to Damian, "It's all right," and then was in his corner just kind of recovering for a bit. But you could tell he was never gonna give up in that situation.
Yeah, he didn't even consider it. Yeah, and that was something
very respectable.
Yeah, and I mean, he didn't take anywhere near the time.
No, he was ready quick.
Was like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah,
and I think most guys in a fight where they'd been dropped at that point, I mean, they would have
taken their
milked
time
that a little bit, and yeah, he just was, just all heart, man. It was I mean, I hate to say an impressive performance and a loss, but I mean, it was he showed a lot of heart in that one.
a lot of guys wouldn't have come back from a couple of those shots. Like there were a few of them where you could tell like Don was just about out, and he recovered real quick. I have a lot of respect for that. He was tough, man, and that knee, like Pat said, rocked him like right on the nose. He was all bloody after, and I just like for him to come back from it so quick. You know where his heart's at, you know where his head's at, and that's just I think a lot of it has to do with the experience too, right? He's been in there with some absolute dogs, and he's a tough, resilient fighter, and he's always going to come back and be tough. So I was glad that fight, like I feel like that fight could have been done with the knee. Like some people probably would have like that fight would have ended. That knee would have been able to end the fight for some people, and for him to just get back up, kind of brush it off that quick. Like Rick said, a lot of other fighters probably would have milked the clock a little bit on that one, but hats off to him. I don't know if it was the adrenaline or what, but dude, he came back, and when he got, he was still there. He didn't really land much of his own after the knee and even before that, but it's not like he was half wobbled and all hurt and stuff like that. He was there, and it took Damian a couple more shots to hurt him again. But like you said, guys, like for him to come back after not only that knee, but some of those big shots that he took early in the fight, like you just know he's a tough game opponent, hard to put him out,
Yeah, when it comes to a Don Shainis fight, man, there's the things that you're never gonna question are his toughness and his heart, man, and those are the two things that shine through the most for sure.
Yeah, and he never went into survival mode in that fight, right? Like we see it in a lot of fights where guys start getting tagged, and then all of a sudden it's like a victory is, okay, I'm gonna just try to, I'm gonna try to make it. I'm gonna try to go the distance here. I'm gonna try to make it to the end, and he was actively trying to win every minute of that fight.
Yep.
Like, he kept coming forward. He kept, like he was trying to change angles. He was trying to change levels. He was trying to, he continued to try to win regardless of how many shots he was taking. And that was something that, you don't see a lot. And, especially at this level, there, you see guys start to, they start to get tagged up a little bit, and then, it's all of a sudden their output goes way down. And, Don was actively trying to win the entire time.
Yep. He got finished coming forward. I mean, he was coming forward when the combo hit him that finished the fight. I mean, he even when he was rocked after he got hit with that combo, he still was trying to come forward.
Yeah,
he was the one pushing the pressure and the pace. He was just not really mounting any offense.
Yeah, I think it was about time that Damian Nelson put a performance together like that. He's another guy who kept on coming up real short in some fights. The Nate Grebe fight, he was there for it. Nate's a real tough guy. However, Nate will tell you Damian hit him with some huge shots, and even Nate himself said like the Damian Nelson power has to be respected in this fight. And that fight, the Nate Kelly fight under the PFL banner, like Damian Nelson's a real tough guy. He keeps on getting put against tough guys, but this was a performance where he really put everything together and got the job done. The striking was flawless, and that's another guy, Law MMA, training with Steve Lee, Ray Longo, all those guys out there at Longo MMA. It's like, it's just awesome to see a guy like him put it all together and go until he finished the fight, right? There were fights where he had all the opportunities to get a finish, but never did, came up a little short in a decision, right? For him to put it all together and get the job done here against Don Shainis, it just goes to show how he's leveling up and getting better and better, fight after fight.
Definitely.
Well, that brings us to our main event of the evening. Right here, we have Jan Oliveira versus Ali Zebian. Man, I was actually really excited about this fight, and I was really happy about what I was seeing early. Unfortunately, the eye poke did happen. That's a topic of discussion. I don't know exactly how the DQ happened. I would love to talk. Maybe Rick has some insight on that. I know that the team of Ali Zebian is contesting it, but I feel like it's a rightful contest of decision there. If he comes up short in it, then so be it. But I think, there's certain fights where it's proper to contest the decision, and there's certain fights where it's like, nah, it's pretty fair. But for this one, I feel like it's worth the risk, right? Or worth doing all this for. But man, I was back to the fight itself. Like I was super impressed with what I saw. Jan Oliveira, Ali Zebian had quite a lot of words to say in that press conference we had, and they got all riled up. Jan Oliveira hit Ali Zebian with a nice sweep when they were on the feet, took him down, which he promised he would do. I think a lot of people were kind of impressed to see Jan Oliveira take Ali Zebian down to the mats. But I feel like we saw it coming, right? He said he was going to do it. It was probably something on his to-do list that night just to prove a point, like he said. But I saw such a great fight. I hope it gets rebooked. It was a good fight while it lasted, and I'm very curious to see how the contest plays out.
So I'm just going to say it how it is. Very disappointing finish to the fight. I mean, all of us wanted to see the fight end without controversy, without any issues. I mean, we just wanted to see those two guys go to war, and they were. It was a great first round. I know Ali caught him with a big right hand at one point in the first round. They were kind of just in there swinging, having fun. Like you could tell both guys were kind of just feeling themselves and in their zone. And then Jan's wrestling was very impressive, the way he was able to control Ali. And I know a lot of people expected the fight to be finished fairly early. I was one of them, but neither guy looked like they started to fade into the second round or at all. Like both guys still looked fresh by the time the fight ended. They were both in there. I think they were wrestling when the eye poke happened. So just a very unfortunate situation. And I do want to ask Rick if this one will be ran back eventually.
Yeah, we'll just jump me, man. We'll shoot it right over to Rick because I'm just as curious as you are, man. I think the fight was as advertised, and I think it was kind of going at a pace where we were all very excited for it. And unfortunately, the eye poke happens. I agree. The DQ was kind of a weird. I wasn't expecting it when they read the decision for it to go that way. So I want to just kick it to Rick, man. Just have him kind of talk that through.
So where do you want me to start? Do you want to start with are we rebooking it, or do you want me to start with
start with DQ and then go into the rebooking?
So ultimately, that is 100% referee discretion, right? So that's something that when it comes to any kind of like, I know they're trying to get it overturned. I don't see it happening because ultimately, like the way that the laws are written and the way that the whole thing works is they say it's up to the referee to make that call. So unless if the referee is standing by the call, it would be, they'd be the only athletic commission in the country that was going to overrule what the referee was saying and say, we disagree with the referee's assessment here. So I don't think it's going to get overturned. I guess I'll start with that. And as far as, and again, I didn't have like, there's not like a formal process where I've had a conversation with them to understand exactly why. Right. Ultimately I don't want to say I don't care because that makes it seem like I just know that whether I agree with it or not, ultimately it's not going to change no matter what. Right. So, and that's with any call, not this one. Right. So I don't really I wasn't looking for chapter and verse on exactly why it was a DQ, but from what I overheard, it was not so much that the fingers went into the eye. It's that there was also there was a second act. Once his fingers went into the eye, it was either a twist or he kind of there was more pressure applied. So the fingers went in, and it wasn't just in one motion. It was the fingers went in and then there was something else. And we're talking split seconds, but it's still a matter of, the analogy that I used when talking to somebody else was probably because the Super Bowl's on my mind, but it's like in a football game, if you go to tackle a guy and you hit him in the face mask, or you grab the face mask and pull the head around, so that was kind of what I overheard, is that it made it look like it was intentional because Ali knew the fingers were at least maybe not in the eye, but in a spot they weren't really supposed to be. And there was kind of that second, motion of applying pressure. But again, I haven't heard that directly from the referee, so I can't say for sure. But again, the call is the call, That's right. And realistically, if it ended as, a no contest, I don't know if that's less controversial there, right? Because there are going to be people that are saying it should have been a DQ, and even with it ending the way that it did, Zebian's people were pissed and yelling at Jan, and they were acting like he was faking it. And so, I mean, no matter what happened, it was going to be like there was controversy no matter how you slice it. And I was getting text messages from Jan at like 20 past 2 in the morning. I was there for a while, kind of wrapping things up with Joe, and I got home about 2, and I usually pull up the fights on Fight Pass, and I kind of watch some of the broadcasts just to see how it looked. And and he was texting me. He was at the hospital, and he had a corneal tear. And I had one a couple years ago. Like it sucked. Like it sucked bad, but it wasn't like it's not something that's like you're not usually at risk for anything long term. Like like it hurt like one of the most painful things I've ever felt in my life for about 24 hours.
Yeah.
But then, my vision was blurry, and it was a really tough 24 hours, but then, hours 24 to 48 were a lot better. And then by about, 72 hours, I was completely fine. My vision was great. And so I guess, I'm not a doctor. I've only had one corneal tear in my life, but if his was like mine, there's no possible way he could have continued fighting.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I couldn't even, like it was just too like I couldn't even open my eye. Like it was, and it stung. Like it just sucked. Like I can't describe it and it was like, and mine happened from like, I think my kid was 5 at the time, and he went to like hug me, and his finger went in my eye, and like it hurt that bad. So I mean, it's I didn't have a problem with it, at the time. I don't think Jan's a guy that's going to lie about it just to get out of there. I mean,
no,
doing well in the fight. The fight was back and forth. But yeah, as far as will it be rebooked? I mean, kind of has to be, right? I mean,
I would love to see that. Yeah.
I mean, both guys want it. Like, so what am I going to say, right? Like, like Jan's the new champ, right? He's won the belt via DQ, and he's saying, I want to fight that guy.
Right.
Like, the guy that just poked me in the eye, we have unfinished business. I want to finish that fight. Let's get it going. And Ali sent me a message that night, right? Like, how soon can we do it? He was talking about, can we do it in March? And I'm like, I don't have a March card. So, both guys are saying they want it. I mean, so the only way that it wouldn't happen is if we just decide to go a different direction. And I don't know that that's going to go well, right? Like there'd be no reason for us to go a different direction. It seems like everybody, both fighters want it, and, the people that watched it want it. So yeah. That'll be, I assume we'll rebook it for May. I mean, I haven't formally offered it to either guy, because I haven't offered any fights for May yet, but yeah, that's the plan.
That's awesome, man. Good to hear. I was going to ask you about May. I have a couple questions about May, but if there's anything else that you guys want to sum up and talk about the card first, more than welcome to finish up with Combat FC 6. Yeah, Pat,
I do want to talk about Alex Bailing versus Shawn Nichols. I mean, Shawn Nichols came out early, quick.
That was so
dropped Alex Bailing. I mean, since it's an amateur fight, it takes a little bit less for a stoppage to occur. And we all looked at each other and we were like, oh, this fight's over. He's finishing him. And then Bailing got back up. And it wasn't that he just got back up. He then went on to win rounds 2 and 3 and got the decision in a gritty performance, man. Like, he got dropped bad in that first round, and I don't think any of us expected him to win after that sequence.
I thought he
looked great.
I thought the ref was going to stop it too. Yeah. But that is something, like, I was going to talk about the Jan Oliveira and Ali Zebian. Like, that was referee Kevin McDonald. Kevin McDonald's been in there for some huge fights. Like, there's definitely something that he saw that we didn't pick up on, and we don't really know about. There's a reason behind it, because Kevin McDonald is, he knows what he's doing. Of course, all these refs do, but Kevin McDonald's a super experienced ref from New England, and I think he definitely saw something that we didn't as spectators. But the Bailing and Nichols fight, man, I was gonna bring it up earlier, I forgot to. I'm glad you did, Pat. But man, talk about a comeback. Like, that is a fight where you can really just say, one guy got dropped early. He knew that was he had to win both rounds. You know, he was down one round. If he wanted a decision win, he was going to have to win the second and the third. And, you know, that's just mental toughness right there, in my opinion. Persevering, adversity, stuff like that, overcoming adversity, right? Getting dropped, almost getting finished, then just bearing down and saying, all right, I got to bite the bullet here. 2 rounds. I just lost the first. And he did exactly that, right? And especially as an amateur, it's just super impressive to see.
And yeah, I think we also
100%.
have to bring up Travis Demko as well, who finished the night with a 27-second knockout. I mean, that was just crazy. I know his entire friends, family, everyone was sitting right in front of us, and they had stayed the whole night to wait for his fight. And I mean, it was literally like a blink of an eye where Demko just kind of ran out there and just finished the fight, and then everyone went crazy, and then the night was over. And I mean, it was a perfect way to end the night, honestly.
Oh, perfect.
It was perfect. I know, obviously, you know, he probably would have wanted to fight a little bit earlier in the night, but at the same time, I mean, come on, you can't end the night better than that.
That's right. He was the real main event of the evening, wasn't he?
Technically, yeah.
But that's another point I just want to hit on real quick. I talked to a couple of the fighters that fought early, and then I saw we saw Don Chanis, we saw Damian Nelson. But when we were talking early to fighters when we were talking late night to fighters who fought real late on the card, some of them were like, man, I got to watch this entire card and I had a ton of fun doing it. And that was cool too. I'm sure a lot of the fighters who fought after the main card on Fight Pass enjoyed it. I'm sure they were able to, you know, they lived the moment. They were able to enjoy the whole fight card. Like that was David Giuliano who said that he had a fun time watching the fights. And today I was the first time I ever talked to him. He wanted me to ask about the fight footage, and we had a great conversation. I think he's a guy I want to see him back. I think he's, like Rick said, a real good dude. Like I could tell just by having a short conversation with him, he's a real good dude. He's from New Jersey, came up here to fight, did a good job, and he's a local guy. He's you know, probably more or less easy to book because he's pretty close and puts on a good show. That's what these promoters are looking for. So he proved his point that night, and I know he'll definitely have more opportunities down the road because that's how you do it.
Yeah. Him and Medeiros might be fun.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. A little sneak peek, maybe.
Rick.
So just a couple things on the fights that you guys mentioned. Some of the guys enjoyed fighting later in the night. Some of the guys hated it.
Yeah, I believe it.
You know, I got a ton of messages from people like, "Oh, can you move me up? Can you move me up?" And you know, everybody's the main character of their own story, right? So they're looking at, you know, hey, this is what would be best for me, and I get it, but you know, we have to try to battle. You know, we've got a couple different shows, right? We've got our Facebook show, we've got our Fight Pass show, we've got our in-venue product. So it's like we're trying to balance a lot of different things there. But yeah, on the fights, that Nichols and Bailing fight was so much fun. That was such a good fight. And one thing that I have to book this fight at some point. There's another kid named Sean Nichols who fought for us 1 or 2 shows ago. They're both 135 pounders. They're both named Sean Nichols. They spell their name slightly different, and they're both about the same age.
The battle of Sean's.
Like just to see like how confused the boxing commission would be and how stressed out like the judges would be, like yeah, and like they're about the same size, similar build, like just to see like how no that's not what I meant. The other, you know, like
yeah,
you know, so I don't know, that would just be fun for me.
Oh, it'd be hilarious.
That would be awesome.
It'd be hilarious.
I mean, not that long ago, like speaking of the names, you mentioned Dan Cormier earlier. There's a kid in New Jersey named Eddie Alvarez who fights at 125, and I tried to book Dan Cormier versus Eddie Alvarez because I was like, that'll be awesome.
Oh man.
So, you know, I like, again, I don't know, I do like,
that's
like
awesome.
Fun fights. I like to goof around, but but anyways, yeah,
that would have been super cool.
That was both of the fights that you mentioned were cool. I mean, Travis picked up a big win. He's a lot of fun. You know, he had his first fight with us was a lot of fun, and he had that interview that I mean, I don't want to say it went viral, but it got a lot of views on it. You know, he had the cigar in his mouth, and he was cracking jokes, and you know, he's a lot of fun. He's the guy that we like having on the card. there were some other really good amateur fights too, just to kind of buzz through them real quick. I mean, Jared St. Jean and Thomas D'Souza, great fight.
Yes. Big knockout.
Yeah, Thomas looked really good in that fight. You know, he was a first time guy coming in and fighting a tough guy in St. Jean. You know, he's been training a while though. You know, Thomas has been training for about 4 years. So, you know, we knew that even though we didn't have a ton of experience, it was still going to be an entertaining fight. So we're going to look to get both guys back in there, you know, different opponents, obviously, on the next show. You know, Tyler Gauthier and Tom Duffy, you know, it was a lot of fun, split decision there. You know, both guys look pretty good in that fight. They both had moments. You know, Kevin Ular and Rosario. I mean, that was a fight that was, you know, a lot of back and forth action there too. Both guys had moments. And so, I mean, I think a lot of these guys, you know, and you know what, the Thurman Hargrove and Key Baltazar fight, that was a lot of fun until the injury. And you know, that's one thing. Like a lot of these guys, I mentioned it when we were chatting before we got on. We had so many good pro fights that the amateurs didn't really get a ton of airtime, you know, in the previews. But you know, they all went out there and fought their asses off, and there was really, you know, there weren't any of those amateur fights you can look at and be like, okay, that was a blowout. That fight sucked. Or, you know, the guy didn't look like he belonged in there. And, you know, they all fought their asses off. And
that's right.
I'd be happy to book any one of them again.
Hargrove landed a mean leg kick. I remember as soon as he landed it, Chris looked at me and he was like, you cannot take too many kicks like that. And it was already over after that one kick. His leg was already, I mean, he already put Baltazar's leg basically limp at that point. He survived the rest of the round, but after the doctor looked at it, no way was he letting him go out there in the second round when he was basically limping on that leg.
Yeah.
That's right. So let's talk about May a little bit. Rick, how many title fights would you like to have? Are you just kind of focused on booking that 185 or I'm sorry, 170, or are you looking at other stuff too?
That's a tough question to answer because I don't necessarily go into it thinking, hey, I really want to book 3 title fights. Like that's what we had on this one.
Right.
You know, I don't go into it thinking that, but also if I have a fight that makes sense for a belt, I'm also not opposed to doing it for a belt based on the fact that, you know, like I'm not just going to say, wow, we already got a couple title fights and, you know, I'm worried about how long it's going to go. And, I don't know. I mean, there's so many. I mean, you know, Carlos Lazoya looked great. He was asking for a title shot. You know, if we find somebody that makes sense for him, I'm not opposed to that. You know, I mean, we have to figure out. I haven't talked to Duma since the event, but he lost an opponent on, you know, 10 p.m., 11 p.m. the day before weigh-in. So I imagine he's going to want to get back in there. And
he does. He definitely does. We were talking to him too.
Yeah, and so he's a reigning champion, right? So what am I going to say to Duma? Like, you know, hey, I know you lost an opponent on the last one, but we're kind of full. So,
we're not going to book you.
Yeah, we're not going to book our, you know, our champ. Like, let's, you know, catch us in September. You know, and there's, you know, there's some other guys that we've been talking to about, you know, possible title fights as well. You know, I mean, Jerry Muse is a guy that he was asking for a title fight. He had actually, so just a little background on the Garib and Shainis thing. Both of them were interviewing for the Ultimate Fighter back in December. And, you know, they were both getting pretty good feedback back then. It was, you know, nothing was official. And it was, you know, hey, we're thinking that there's, you know, maybe, and, you know, as soon as they brought it up to me, you know, it was actually Garib that brought it up to me. And he said, you know, hey, I might have to pull out of this fight. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, do you want me to stay in the fight? And I said, you know, hey, let's bring it to Shainis and let's ask him. And I had asked, you know, I had asked Jerry because he was talking about going down to 145. And, you know, as soon as I mentioned that Shainis was potentially available, he was 100% in. He was like, yes, I will absolutely fight Shainis for a title on your show in February at 145. But then all of a sudden the dates on the Ultimate Fighter changed because they were initially supposed to hear, I think they were supposed to hear back in like December and it was supposed to film in February, but then the dates got pushed way out. So that was something that, you know, I had, like, we were talking about potentially doing a title fight in February. Like we thought that again, Garib was going to be out and Jerry was going to be in. But then didn't end up happening, right? So now, and Jerry on this one, he wasn't going to be able to get down to the weight when Garib pulled out. But he's still, hey, that's a fight I really want. He really wanted that Sheamus fight, and he was supposed to fight Damian Nelson, and he ultimately stepped aside so that they could fight. And so again, what am I gonna do with Jerry, right? Like, he's the guy. We were trying to book him in a title fight, so I mean, I don't know. Might book a title fight in every weight class. I have no idea.
Hey, why not?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, right? When you have these events that are 3 months apart, it's a blessing because we have guys that, if they kind of get on our schedule, right? Like, for most guys, fighting 3-4 times in a year is plenty. And if they know that those are our dates, we'll have guys that'll fight, every 3 months for us and get their 3 fights, 4 fights in.
Right.
But it ends up being a curse at times because we've got so many good fights that we could book. There were guys that I wanted on this last card that I wasn't able to get booked.
Yeah.
Like we ran out of space, so tough question to answer. I mean, I would say there's going to be at least 2, could be as many as 4. But
I love it, man.
It's tough to say.
Can we expect to see Damian Nelson back too?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I can't say for sure because it's like, as we look up and down the 145ers in the area, I mean, who would we put him in with? That's the tough thing with Damian, right? Is there's basically Garib, who he's already fought. There's Sheamus, who he just fought. There's Tom Pags. But
that would be a cool fight.
But I mean, outside of that, I mean, I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but like, who would you say? I mean, Tarim De Silva? I mean, who else is someone that would make sense for Damian up here?
Yeah, true.
145. Unless we rebook that Jerry fight, and if Jerry wants to go all the way down to 45 for a Damian fight, so it's, I like Damian. I would definitely have him back. I just don't know if, coming off a big win like that, I don't know if there's going to be other opportunities that he's going to get between here and May that make more sense for him than whoever would be available in New England for him.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
he looked awesome. He looked awesome. He's welcome back anytime. He looked fantastic.
Awesome.
That's great, man. Well, that sums it up for all the questions that I have. I really just wanted to ask, about what we should expect for title fights in May. But if you guys have anything that you want to discuss or ask real quick, feel free.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all set, man. It was great, getting back on here with you guys and kind of going full circle and summarizing everything. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next event in May, fam. 100%.
Yeah, can't wait for the next preview.
Hell yeah, we'll do it again. I was talking to Rick about it yesterday. Well, I want to start doing this group of 4 people: myself, Patrick, Chris, and Rick. Every Combat FC fight card, we're gonna jump on. We're gonna do a preview show. We're gonna recap it, Monday, Tuesday, the week after. But man, this was cool to do. Like, it was super important for me to come full circle on this, right? We did the preview, we covered the event. Now got to recap it. Once again, Rick, I think you did an amazing job putting together the show. Production was amazing. Matchmaking was amazing. I'm glad I was there, man. And I'm looking forward to May as well. We'll be back, and we'll definitely be doing these shows again because this show had great engagement. The preview had great engagement as well. We hovered around like 50 or 60 people throughout today's show, which is pretty good, and hope the numbers will grow for sure. This card was huge. I expect the next card to be just as good, if not better, right? And, man, we'll keep running these back. I always have fun talking to you guys. I talk to Pat and Chris almost every day. Rick, we've started to talk a lot too. So, man, I'm glad we were able to put this together. Thank you guys for the time. May, we'll see you soon, and we got some more great shows coming up.
And shout out Rick for always being great to work with and helping us promote these shows and promote everything. He's a great man to work with, and it's very happy to have this relationship now.
Thanks, man. 100%.
Yeah, we appreciate you, letting us into the event and covering the event and the access that you provide. So, we appreciate it. So doing shows like this just kind of add to that as well, man. So thanks for the access and thanks for having us.
Definitely. Thanks for all the help, guys.
Of course.
Always, man. Well, Like I said, I appreciate the time tonight, guys. What a show. We did a great job recapping it. I think all of the points that we wanted to sum up and discuss, we hit them all. And like I said, I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. May's going to come soon, so we'll jump on here soon. And as the fights get booked, I can't wait to announce it, promote it, and just see what kind of happens for this card. I think we have some big fights to happen here in New England, and Rick is the right guy to make them. So we're in good hands here.
Hell yeah.
That's it, guys. Awesome. I appreciate the time. We'll see you guys soon. And to everybody tuning in, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
No problem, guys. Let's see.